that's what people think of when they think of generosity. They're like, well, I gotta give money somewhere. And it usually feels like something that is from us. So if I'm going to be generous, then I have to give up something. And to me, I've studied, I've learned from great people who are incredibly generous, and it really becomes an experience that is for us, not from us. And so we'll just start with one of my core truths that I've lived, learned, experienced over and over. God wants generosity for us, not from us. And when we live into other people's lives, when we give into their experiences, when we invest in them, man, there's just so many incredible things that come back to me. And it almost seems selfish then to be generous.
Yeah. Why do you think that people feel that generosity is something that when I get to a certain point here, then I can actually be generous, or when this and this is aligned, then I can actually be generous?
We have a lot we can unpack on this, Ben, but I feel like I've been a student of generosity, and so much that there's words that come up like philanthropy. Well, when you think of a philanthropist, what do you think of?
Yeah, I think of someone who is like maybe like have already gotten their bag of money, and that they have now or moved on to the second part of their maybe career as as being their generosity entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and that's I think what most of us think of, or what we've maybe heard or experienced, is like, oh, this person who's made it, so and so has a building named after them at a school. So and so endowed this scholarship. Warren Buffett gave his giving pledge, which we could talk about later. It's amazing, but he said he's going to give away 99% of his wealth. What I love about what he writes in it is he diminishes what he does, because he realizes that most people sacrifice way more to give a little bit to their church, to give to a local charity, because they forego an experience, they forego saving, they forego doing something to give. Meanwhile, he's giving more than anybody else, but he's not giving up things to do it. And when I think of generosity, we are foregoing something for ourselves to give to somebody else, whether it's time that we give up that we could do something, or it's our money. But it brings such profound joy into my life. It's way more enjoyable, exciting, fun to get a thank you note in the mail from somebody for doing something than it is to go buy something new. It's just a longer lasting, deeper joy. And that is something that I've learned to love about generosity.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed, again, like you are one of, in my opinion, one of the foremost leading, maybe unknown experts on generosity. I mean, truly, not just because you and I are friends, but because I've actually had a front row seat to watch. And there seems to be this correlation, Zach, from my like vantage point, that the more generous you have become, the more abundance, joy, fulfillment that I see you are experiencing in your life. I mean, is that just like, am I just seeing the little Instagram snapshots,
And that's not just me, Ben. That's, to me, that's scriptural. And from my faith tradition as a Christian, God challenges us on that. He says, test me in this, give and watch how I will pour out blessings upon you. And it's not give to get, but it's give and trust. And so if we wait in our lives to say that we've made it, then we're not really getting the trusting part. It's a biblical thing to me, but I know in other faith traditions, which I am aware of and have friends in different faiths, that there's a truth that ripples through other traditions as well. And it's all there. Like, we're called to give, to help others, and there's cool things that happen from it. For me, it goes way back to like some core principles I learned. And I have shared a story that I call It's All About the Shoes. So when I was a teenager, I remember an evening where my mom called my brothers and me in to dinner, and we had to leave the things that we were doing to go do this ridiculously terrible thing that my parents asked, which was go have dinner together as a family. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to do this. And then we get to dishes afterwards, which they forced us to do. It was terrible, the labor that we had to supply to the family. So my brothers and I are begrudgingly doing dishes, and I then tell my parents, I need these new shoes and shorts for basketball. And my mom's like, well, tell me about them, Zach. What makes them so special? I don't know. Everybody has them, so I needed to have them. But I knew our family didn't necessarily have a lot of money to do it. We had all that we needed, but there wasn't usually extra. And my mom said something that I'll always vividly remember. She looks at me and she said, Zach, you better get a great job because you really like nice things. I was like, okay, so does that mean I get the shoes or not? Well, I didn't get them. And then fast forward about 6 weeks. So I was upset when I didn't get the shoes. Then I was taken aback. 6 weeks later, we're sitting in church. And I watched my parents do something that they had done every week. I just had never seen what the details were. So my parents are both pastors. Like your dad's a pastor as well. You probably experienced a little bit of these dynamics. But this week, one of them was up front, the others with my brothers and me in the pew, and I watched them put their check into the offering plate, which they did with intentionality, with regularity, every week. I had just never seen the amount. Well, guess what the amount was? $150. So I don't get my shoes and shorts, but they're putting $150 in the plate. And I still don't really know the situation at the time, but they were doing this weekly, and I think we had other resources, but they just chose to be intentionally generous and systematic about that. And that stuck with me. And so I fast forward 30 years, and now I'm in my job as a financial planner. And I tried to do what my mom said. I tried to get the good jobs because I still like nice things. And I'm sitting with clients, helping them through some planning, and they are moving from our city, from Naperville to South Carolina. And they like things that I do. They value giving to their church and being involved, but they love golf, and they joined a country club in South Carolina, and they still have one here. We're going through their budget, and they're itemizing out what they spend. And I remember, like, it was $40,000 a year that they're spending on golf. And the wife looks at the husband and says, don't you think our giving budget should be as big as our golf budget? And I'm like, I want to see where this goes. Well, what's that guy going to say at that point? He's got no chance other than to say, yes, of course it should. Now, if you're sitting there, Ben, I know you like to golf a little bit, but you'd be like, well, I would never spend 40 grand on golf. And someone else is, that's silly. Someone else is thinking, well, I would never give 40,000. That's silly. But what I've learned from conversations with lots of people about money is there's no room for judgment, right? We all do things that someone else would think is silly with our money, and we get to balance that. And in this case, generosity for them became a balancing act between saying, okay, I love these nice things over here, but I also know there's other people that I need to support. And that's a little microcosm of how I've learned about it through the years and tried to live that out in my own life.
Yeah, I think the thing that has always struck me about generosity, I got to see it with like my parents, like in the giving, and it was oftentimes in like, the offering, like what you talked about. But I also got a front row seat to watching them, especially as I kind of moved into my professional world and started to gain the new capability, and that's what I call money. As I gain a new capability and more of that capability, about how they allocated it. And number one, there's an endless need for more. But I think the thing, Zach, that has always really struck me about you is the willingness without agenda giving. And it's not just in charity. It's like, I mean, so can you talk about the different forms of generosity? Because I think sometimes people are listening to this going like, well, I don't have a cause that I care about. And okay, great. But I think there's other forms of generosity that does not need to be something that's to a 501c3, because I've had a front row seat with you to watching other forms of generosity that you do that no one knows about.
So giving money is certainly part of it. And there's wonderfully creative things that people can do around that and incredibly impactful. And I think if we try to segment any of these and say, well, I am generous this way, but not that way, we're cheating ourselves. So to me, it's a whole person experience. I've been on the giving money part of the journey my whole life because my parents started me with a 4-quarter allowance and said, you got to give one of those. So right from the start, they're like 25% you got to give. So I've then had that bar, and Kristen, my wife, and I have spent our adult lives saying, okay, how can we get back to that and move beyond it? But at one point along that journey, I realized that I was being cheap, like going out to dinner with people and splitting a tab when I could pick up that tab, not because I had to, not because I had more money than them or they had more money than me or whatever. It was just like I could be generous to friends or family that I cared about. And I realized that I was not doing as much of that as I wanted to because I was trying to be so generous to hit a benchmark or a number over on this other side. So this is kind of a practical thing, but we started what we call our Live Generously Fund. When I take a bonus or as part of my pay, we just set aside money into a separate account so that we could give more at a grad party or do something for family when they need it or do something for a person. It has nothing to do with 501c3 or charity. It just has to do with maybe making someone smile or making a day better or helping them when they're down. And I think that's something that everybody will experience great joy from doing. And it's not so hard to do. It doesn't have to be big dollar amounts. It can be whatever they choose for it to be.
When you think about the world that we live in today, where a lot of what we see on social media is like what we have, which creates opportunities to feel like what we don't have. What are the things that you are telling your boys? And for the audience, when Zach's talking about being generous and generosity, it'd be like, well, that's really great. Like, you don't have the context. I mean, Zach has 4 boys and 4 strapping boys and who eat like a lot. So, I mean, this isn't like he's just like, oh, yep, don't have kids, and doesn't feel the impact of inflation. But how are you talking with your kids about generosity?
Showing them is the first thing, right? We all learn better through experience, and it never started with money. So you asked about different types, and I went on a long tangent, but just to finish up types of generosity first. One is certainly money. One is experiences. Another type of generosity that's critical is just time. One of the people that I admire so much in my life is my father-in-law, who, if you look from the outside in, you'd be like, wow, our kids just gravitate towards him. They love spending time. And it's because he invested time from the moment they were little, just to lay on the floor and play with them. When he could have been sitting on the couch on his phone and observing, he was there. And then he drives 2 hours to come watch a game and drives 2 hours back. They just know that they have his attention. And it's been a model for me. And so, like the simplest ways that we can be generous to people is just maybe turn our phone off once in a while and pay attention to someone who's with us. So I've done it. I mean, it's easy to say it. I've failed at that way more times than I've succeeded, right? I'm distracted. I've got something going on at work. I've got another kid yelling at me and my wife's asking me to do something. And so I'm as guilty as anybody of not doing it, but I have tried. I've intentionally said, I'm going to invest this time in our kids' lives. So that's where I think it started with them. And then we use some of the same tools that my grandma taught my mom and that she taught me about money. And then we've just been open with them when it comes to experiences too. Like, hey, how'd this person do helping us at dinner? What are we going to do to tip them? And maybe one of the coolest things that that we've experienced with that, or that they've experienced, is just going above and beyond when someone didn't deserve it. So they weren't a good server. They didn't deliver excellent experience. They messed up the order, all the things, but maybe they're just having a bad day. And so we've done nice things in ways like that. I think that just opens up our kids' eyes to saying, oh, the world's a little bit bigger than me. There's someone else there I can invest my time, my life, my money into. I mean, we failed at it. It's easy for me to preach on this like a true pastor's kid, but I don't want to act like I'm a saint either, because I screw it up all the time.
I think that's the thing that makes it so much more real and believable, is that you're in the arena. You're in the arena of being, or at least the attempt at being present, to giving time, to giving the experiences, to going above and beyond, to understanding that there is often a story that you have no idea that's currently running through someone's like life, that maybe shows up as a bad experience or bad service.
So you mentioned that word earlier, intentionality, and I think that it goes right along with generosity, because being intentional with one's time is a way to be generous. So I've enjoyed coaching my kids. I played basketball through my days and loved the sport, loved the game. And so over the last 15 years, I've coached 37 teams with my 4 boys. And I'm going to go 0 for 4 as a coach. None of them are going to go to college and play basketball. None of them are going to be professionals. Right? Like, the outcomes didn't transpire that I thought maybe would have. So I'll go 0 for 4 from that regard. But I'm 4 for 4 in terms of having experiences with the kids that I never would have had, in terms of finding ways to help them fail and persevere, meet their friends, get to know them. And it is, it's just such an incredible gift to be able to spend time with people in a sphere that I normally wouldn't have had I not coached. And so as I was wrapping that up, a lot of people reached out and said thanks, and talked about like I did something, but I got way more from that than I ever gave into it, because I've got relationships now with dozens, if not hundreds, of kids that I never would have had. That's an example to me of one of the types of generosity that just says you're going to get more out of it than you put in.
I think it's so true. All of those different layers, and I'm imagining this flywheel, Zach, of this generosity, that it creates momentum. On the podcast, I've talked a lot about that the world that we live in is just an energy game. Our time is a representation of how we allocate our energy. Like, our actions represent the potential exchange that we're going to get in that exact same time frame, that time that everyone has. And I think the thing that I've noticed also with you is the intentionality. Like, you just were talking about it. I talked about it in the intro with you. I think the thing that I've noticed is that you don't always get it right, but that's not the point. It's not the point. I think the intentionality is the process. It's the process. It's the spark. And if people are trying to control like the outcome, like every single day, you're not on your phone, like you're paying attention to your kids. You are, having clarity with your partner, right? I mean, I think that's where people get into this, judgment, shame spiral. But can you talk about how you view intentionality and how you position that in your life?
So our company, we focus on core values, and in the first one is live intentionally. And rather than just being words on the wall, we try to embody those at work. We hire by them, we promote by them, we reward, we fire based on anti-values. And the first one is live intentionally, and it says busy is not an excuse. There is time for what matters in our life, and that's faith, family, it's community, it's friends, work, obviously. There's time for all of it. And it is easy to waste time. And so to me, intentionality is at its simplest essence saying, I will prioritize this. I will try to do it. You've been working out like a champion lately. Everyone could look at your life and say, he's got all these companies he's running. He's got a young family. He's got so many things going on. There's no way that he could have time to work out. Well, you made time for it. That's all intentionality is. It's just saying, I prioritize it. I will put that first.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I realized, and Jen and I've been having a lot of conversation about that, is that so often people will pull the plug if they can't do it to the fullness of like what they expected it to be, or the time frame that they wanted it to be. And I've had many days where, you know what, I made the decision of having a family moment that maybe put me in bed by like 10:30. And rather than be able to wake up at 4:45, 5 a.m. to get my workout in, is that I wake up at 6, and my daughter wakes up at right around 6:15 a.m. and so I'll make the decision that I'm going to go and actually work out. Maybe I don't get 4 sets of each of the movements, but the reality, could I actually get 1 set of each one of those movements that I was looking at? The point is that 1 set of those movements is better than no sets.
Second value is be real. And the subtext is build trust before sharing truth. So I just got to try to build trust with maybe someone who's listening. You've interviewed some incredibly successful people. I know there's a lot of successful people listening in, and probably the majority of them get up early like you do. Just in full transparency, I suck at getting up early. I'm a snoozer. I'm trying to get better at my sleep habits, but I'm not a morning person just as much as I've tried to be. And yet there's intentionality to fit in a workout somewhere. You shared this with me once when we were talking about biking. You're like, Zach, I saw you just went out and did a 5-mile ride. Like, well, that's all I had time for, was I could go do 20 minutes and get back to the things I needed to do. But rather than skip the workout for that day, I'm going to go do that 20 minutes because that just keeps the habit, it keeps the flywheel going. And that's, I think what I try to apply to life is to say, okay, I'm not going to hit the goal always, but I'm trying to form a habit. If I can form the habit, then progress occurs.
Yeah, busy's not an excuse. Filter number 1. Filter number 2, be real. What else?
Third one is grow purposefully. So I believe God's not done with me yet. I believe God's not done with you yet. There is more that we are called to, each of us. So this morning, as an example, our youngest son had his 8th grade graduation. Now, 8th grade graduation is a big deal for 8th graders. But my older boys were there just like snickering and laughing at the things that the 8th graders said about their experiences and these huge milestones. And I have things happen in my life for you to that feel like just the weight of the world is on us. And I guarantee when we look back in 5 years, we're going to be able to laugh and say, it was just a building block. It was like our 8th grade graduation moment. And they talked about what a roller coaster middle school was. And I'm like, you guys have no idea. There's so much more. The roller coaster goes like this later in life. But grow purposefully is the third one that just says, we're not done yet. And it's all about progress, not perfection. And the fourth one was find solutions. And I swear my kids hate me for saying this over and over, but I'm like, I don't care that you can't do something or that you don't think you want to do something. Find a solution, make it happen. You've heard me share some stories about our second son who just graduated. He finds solutions. So can I tell a quick Alex story?
Oh yeah. Yeah, please.
Entrepreneurs listening will be like, man, this kid's awesome. Some employer will listen to it and say, I don't know if I want them to work for me. And then parents out there are going to be like, yeah, I've got a kid like that. So Alex is in his senior year. He taken what's probably a blow-off class, a botany class. It's easy for him at least. And the teacher dumped all the assignments on them in the syllabus at the beginning of the year, and they could work at their own pace. So it's halfway through the semester. He's got a 98% in the class and decides he doesn't want to go to class anymore. So he starts making up excuses, finding solutions to get out of school early and whatever. And he eventually gets caught in this little scheme he's created, and he gets a detention for it. Now, as a parent, I'm not condoning this behavior. I'm not happy about it, but he's also an 18-year-old kid finishing up senior year. What are we going to do? Ground him? So we have a chat about it. And then he gets home from detention. I'm like, how was it? He was like, Dad, I would do this again in a heartbeat. I skipped 22 classes where he leaves school early to come home, to go to work, to go to the gym. And I had to serve a 45-minute detention. Like, I'd make that trade all day long. Not exactly the kind of solutions that I'm talking about, but there is a path forward for people. And we've tried to get our kids to think about it that way. Like, yes, in school and at work, there's some rules that need to be followed. But in life, there's progress that needs to happen. We've got to find ways to do it.
I love those 4 filters. Those 4 filters, I think, are such great building blocks, I think, for anyone listening to this. Busy's not an excuse. I know that as entrepreneurs, we hide behind busy a lot. It's whether it's emails, it's like, I see this as I'm coaching at Strategic Coach. Well, I don't know if I can do that. It's just, my life is too busy. And it's like, I don't know. I think being real, is such a beautiful, just short one-liner to be able to go, I look at that as if you're being honest, right? It's the same way of being real.
I want to just touch on that real quick because I think it's important. We live in a world right now that's so polarized that people think, oh, I'm being real. I'm going to just throw some crap online and make a post, or I'm going to just tell you how I think it is. And that's not that's not how I live. That might be their version of being real. But this comes from two very diverse perspectives. But the first one is Jesus. Jesus made some statements that were like hard truths about life, but he always did them in relationship with people. He got to know them. He figured out where they were in life, and then he could share. So if I were to get on my soapbox and say, well, you're living your life wrong because of blah, 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 I don't know them. I don't know their stories. That's not being real. The other one where this really, like, the words hit paper was I was listening to Doug Collins. Doug Collins was the coach of the Chicago Bulls in the 80s with Jordan. He gets brought in. He's got the best player in the world on his team. He's a young coach. And what he shared, he's like, I saw things that Michael Jordan could do differently, could do better. But Michael Jordan's not going to listen to me. He doesn't know. So what he was able to do is build a relationship with Jordan. He was able to build trust with them so that eventually Michael could hear the truths that he had to share. And that's ultimately, now in relating it to my family, I talk about how I feel my wife has succeeded in this tremendously with our boys. She has built just incredibly open relationships and dialogue with them where there's so much trust. They just share way more truth with her about life and girlfriends and all the stuff that high school and college age kids have to deal with. And I admire that and I love that. So that's, to me, the essence of be real is the relationship has to be there first.
I think that, that's a good addendum, I think, to what we're talking about.
The fifth one's live generously. And the subtext to that is just the world's bigger than us, so invest your life in it. And sometimes, like, I will talk to people and I think they could view me as pretty compassionate. So George Bush coined the term compassionate conservative. I want to be clear. I'm a capitalist. Like, I'm all about businesses, but I want to be known as a generous capitalist. And I think the world needs more generous capitalists where it's not just about like, I'm going to make this business bigger for me. I'm going to hit this net worth. I'm going to hit this number. Me. It's saying we can succeed in this together and invest back into the people around us, in the community around us that made it all possible. And I don't think there's enough of that in our world right now.
Why?
Because well, not to get too political, but there's an element that says, well, they're not paying their fair share. We should tax them more. It's like a penalty to force people to be generous. And then there's an element that says you have to take care of everyone, and there has to be equality. And so you get like these polarizing views, and then you get someone who says, well, just there shouldn't be any regulation. There should be no taxes. Just let me do it. But the evidence is not there to support that when people are accumulating more, they give more. So you talked about that earlier, like this journey of, well, I'll give when I've made it. But look at the tax returns of people who make 50,000, 100,000, 200, 500, a million. The percentages on giving don't change. And if they did, it would solve a lot of the issues that would get away from having to tax more, because if your percentage as your income grows starts to creep up on how you impact and give to others, then your tax rate will come down with it. So I figured out a loophole in the system. If I just give more, I have to pay less tax.
And spoiler alert, by the way, anyone who's wanting to understand what's in it for you, in addition to all the other things that Zac was talking about that I think are way more big returns on intention, there is actually a bottom line impact of it. Well, Zac, I really appreciate you actually articulating that of the number one is that you can be generous and a capitalist. Number one. Number two is that when you're generous, like all boats rise.
Yeah, they really do. I just read an article. This was a case study years ago. There was a business owner who leveled up all his people who work there to $70,000 a year salary, and now it's like 6 years later, and it's in Harvard Business Review's case studies as such a success. And I can't cite the source even, but so someone can fact check me on ChatGPT or online. But conceptually, it makes sense, right? If you're giving people a place that they can have meaningful wage and lifestyle, and take away some of the insecurities that normally come with not having enough money, and create an environment where people want to come to work and be part of something, then everybody wins. And ultimately the clients and the customers start to win in that too. Ben, I want to throw a question back at you. Think about this on a spectrum, right? So there's not a right or wrong. But at one end of the spectrum, it says survival of the fittest, like only the strong survive, right? Other end says to those whom much is given, much is expected. And think about how you would wrestle with that, or where you would place yourself on that spectrum.
It's a good spectrum. Well, it's interesting that you use those words, because those were actually words that I remember. I think I was in 8th grade, and I remember my dad actually delivering a sermon. And for anyone who grew up with NPR, then listened to Lake Wobegon days and Garrison Keillor days, is my dad was an incredible storyteller. And he would always, there was always 3 points it was guaranteed. And he actually was succinct to being like, you will always come away with 3 points from my sermon. And it's how he took a congregation from like an average attendance of like 50 in this like small country church to like over like 180. But I remember he had he was talking, and he actually said, give unto God what is God, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And I thought about that, and I was like, that is such an interesting framework and filter. And so I probably, on the spectrum, I like that because it's a little bit clearer. It's a little bit clearer. And it doesn't mean that on that spectrum, on that side of the spectrum, that there are just things that, like Dan Sullivan talks about, the geometry of not being bothered, like everything's made up, nobody's in charge, and life isn't fair, right? It doesn't mean that those 3 things don't exist, but I think that on that spectrum is that the survival of the fittest, just we didn't get here all on our own. Like we got here based off of someone seeing a potential. I mean, I can go back through my framework and my history and go like, because this person saw something in me, they kept me from, allowing, like I think back to like my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Jellish, he saw that I had like this like fire and passion, and that could quickly get out of get out of control, and having that identity, then going through like high school and people going, hey, there's something here. And so I think that
it would be easy for you to reflect back and say, well, I've worked my butt off. I've given up different things so I could focus on this, and et cetera, et cetera. But you're quick to point out people that helped you along the way, even as you were working hard.
And the fact is, I think that when people see potential in you, it's almost a greater impetus for you to want to fulfill that potential. And so often, I think that I think that mindset of like, I can just do it, that rugged individual sort of like mindset, I think really is like a journey to not living in joy. It's like living in the moment before dawn, right? Where they always say it's darkest before dawn. And it's so much more enjoyable when you realize that, hey, there's always more potential. You've never arrived.
Yeah, that's a good way to think. To me, that like what that grow purposefully value is about is we haven't arrived. And circling back a little bit to the generosity piece, if you haven't trained your body, trained your mind, trained your bank account to be generous along the way, the world will always say you don't have enough. Right? I've worked with incredibly goal-oriented clients. They've said, okay, I've got 5 million. If I can get to 10 million, I'll have enough. And they get there because they persevere, they work hard, they're diligent, all their intention, all these things. But what happens when they're at 10? You know this, right?
Oh, yeah. It feels like empty. It feels like not enough, or it feels like they're waiting for the heavens to open.
Yeah, and they say, well, yeah, I got 10, but if I just got to 12, now that would really do it. I can be more generous then, or I can take a break then. And so I've had this learning that net worth is not even close to the most important number that we can track in our life. So I have some for you to think about. I don't want to know your numbers, but how often do you track your net worth? Like sit down and total up. Either you or Jenna, is it once a year? Is it once a month? Like, what do you guys do?
Once a year.
Yeah. So I do it twice a year. I do kind of a quick check in the middle of the year, and then I always do it over like New Year's at some point. And what I realized is I'd watch it go up. I'd have a bad year. I'd watch it go down, up and down, but there was really no meaning to it. And I learned this cool thing from a client. They said, I'm adding joy column to my balance sheet. So they're like writing experiences on there. They had made lifestyle choices that intentionally brought their net worth lower, but they were able to reflect on it better as my life got better because of this. So I added one to mine, and I went back to all our tax returns and I looked at what I gave each year, what we gave, my wife and I. And then I put a cumulative column on the balance sheet. So that as I see our net worth ebb and flow, I can see the cumulative effect of our giving, because ultimately that's what I want to measure. So I would love to be at a point where my cumulative lifetime giving is higher than my net worth, or I give away more in a year than I make. And when I say things like that to people, one time my wife called me out. She was like, what are we going to live on if you give away more than you make? Well, there's an implied baseline to that if I'm able to give away that much, we already have a bunch, right? Because I still like nice things. We're going to go on our bike trip. I'm going to go on some golf trips. We're going to do things with the kids. We're going to go out to dinners. I'm not living a pauper lifestyle, and I applaud people who take that path as well. But it implies that there's growth of something else. And so I just want to be on this journey and invite other people to that fun experience of saying, okay, grow your net worth, grow a business. If that's what your skills are, by all means, go do it. But then put something on that balance sheet with you that you can measure that's meaningful to you, whether it's experiences with your kids, it's time with your family, it's investing in other people, it's giving to places you care about, whatever it is. Make it more than the net worth number, because that number is, I was going to say it's meaningless. It's not at all meaningless. It's incredibly meaningful, but it doesn't invoke meaning, if that makes sense.
It doesn't actually represent your sum total of your identities.
Great way to say it.
The thing I love about what you just were talking about is creating that cumulative total, is it starts to represent the directionality of your generosity, your engagement with someone that isn't yourself. And that I think that's brilliant, Zach. I think that is absolutely brilliant. In my brain, I'm thinking about this idea. We talked about a generous capitalist, and so often in the entrepreneurial world, we're going, well, when's enough going to be enough? And if you've ever been around an entrepreneur, it's not about the number. It's about the value creation. It's about the desire and joy of just creating more for your team, creating more for your customer or your client. The joy of what I call living, of really just of being out there and making guesses and bets. But what I love that this adds like another, like if you look at a 3D model, what you just added on was almost a fourth dimension to there of an additional like why. So whatever your number is that you need to live off of, I think what I'm hearing you say and what I love about this is that if you could give away more than you earn, that means that you've created so much value in the world, that there's so much additional extra abundance that not only can you live, that you can provide your team an incredible life, your clients incredible outcomes, but that you can actually exponentially give more than all of those things.
Right. And if you are an entrepreneur, Ben, the byproduct of your life's work will be more money. That's just the fortunate field that you're in, that we're in. There's a lot of people whose byproduct of their labors, their passion, their skills is not going to be money. So this isn't just focused on money, but if a person is lucky enough to be in a field where the byproduct of their hard work and labors and in thinking leads to more money, then it's pretty important in my mind to attach something else with that, not just a bigger number on the scorecard. Yet it's got to be authentic to them. I met a person once who said they kept working so they could feed more kids. I think it was actually water. I think it was deliver more water to kids in Africa. That was their passion, and that was their why of why they kept doing more. Well, that's authentic to them. That's why they wanted to do it. I know you're not going to be, just because you hit a number on paper, you're not going to be done with what you're doing, because that's not what it's about.
Yeah, it's so interesting when you were asking about how often I check the net worth money dollar amount, and I said like once a year. And there's a point of this where I have, and this might cause a little bit of ruckus, but like I stopped caring. I actually don't care about the net worth. I saw this meme that said, you earn the medals in practice and training, and you just go to races to collect them. And I think that net worth is very much oftentimes like the medal. And I think the thing that for me that I've really gotten fascinated and motivated and just really wanted to get lost in is the process of value creation, the process. And I love that you called out about like the be real, but from a relational standpoint, like having like authentic, genuine relationships, moving to a place of where the agenda is pretty much about like being authentic, genuine, Um, and and I feel like the more that I have spent not measuring the net worth, like the greater the velocity has actually happened. I don't know. How have you found that?
You hit on something, and someone listening in would be easy to say, well, they probably have some money. So it is easier to not care if you're not worried about your next paycheck and making payroll if you're a business owner, right? So there's an element where you have cared at times, and I've cared a lot more and differently than I do now. Um, but I think you've trained yourself along the way. That's what I wanted to call out is, uh, I could hear that statement without knowing you and say, well, he doesn't care about net worth because he has a big net worth. And I don't know if you do. I'm being assumptive here to make a point. Someone could hear that and say, well, it's easy to not care. But I know in your heart, like you're building businesses for the impact that they create, not so that the net worth gets bigger. And I think that's the core truth to your statement is you actually do care. Everybody cares about the medal that they get from the race, but you're willing to practice hard enough because you care about the inputs more than the outputs.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think that well, they say that wisdom or youth is wasted on the young, right? And I think that as you mature and you have more life experiences, I think the thing that, I think that Benny, my son, his passing, really allowed like this incredible deep spring cleaning and reordering and recalibration of my systems. But I think back to when I was young is that I wish someone had had this conversation with me, that to stop focusing so much on how much money you could like make or how much money you could save or the net worth that like I could build. And I'm going through this with my oldest daughter who's a runner. And she had made this comment once. She was like, like I'm sure like something along the lines of I'm sure you're disappointed about like the outcome. And I was like, whoa, hold on here. Like, let's just be really clear. And because maybe this isn't fully hitting you. I was like, I've been so clear, like I don't care about the outcome. What I care about is you falling in love with the process. Because I think if you wait for the outcome, you miss out on the joy and the celebration of the journey. And does that make sense?
That truth hit home on a golf trip years back. And I was in this beautiful destination with great friends playing a game that I love. And I almost came to tears on the first round there, not out of gratitude and joy, but frustration and like, what the hell am I doing here? I can't hit a shot to save my life. This was abandoned dunes. I had left behind 4 little kids at home. I get this amazing experience, and I just sucked at that round of golf. And what I said to myself was, I have got to disassociate the outcome with the experience. Like the outcome of that round of golf was terrible, but the experience was everything that should have been amazing. And that is so incredibly hard for me to do because I'm an outcome oriented person. Like I would measure the success of that experience by, did I break 90? Was I on the good side of 90 or the bad side? And this round that I'm talking about, I was on the bad side of 100, I think. But
welcome to my side.
It will always stick with me. I can just visualize where I was because it was so telling, like, what is wrong with me that I'm so caught up in the outcome right here when journey, the experience is exactly what I had hoped for and planned. So hard to do in life. But my therapist helped me with that one along the way too, to just say, look, you can't control the outcome for yourself, certainly not for those around you. And that's been a hard one for me too with 4 boys.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue for us to talk a little bit about hard things and mental health. And I think context, having had a front row seat with you through life over the last 20 years, um, is that doing hard things, right? We hear about things like misogy's, with like Jesse Eitzler, right? And books like Comfort Crisis coming out that like doing hard things. And you see now like the advent of these like really hard things like that David Goggins brought, You Can't Hurt Me, book, now all of a sudden you see ultras. Now you see like these 200, 250 mile, 350 mile races that are just, these are hard things. And so I want to talk. I'd love to hear your thought on hard things and kind of where you and I really our friendship really deepened in actually doing hard things. Um, and then, but I also like you to associate it with some of the other hard things that most people want to avoid talking about, like mental health.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was turning 40, this 2018, I had been fortunate. I'd done a lot of golf trips with friends. I've seen other people hit that milestone and do something fun and go party and whatever. And I knew I wanted to have fun, but I wanted something meaningful. I wanted a physical challenge and I wanted a charitable challenge. And I don't think I'd ever ridden my bike more than around the neighborhood with our kids, or as a child, like around the neighborhood with friends. But I grew up in Iowa and I had heard about this ride called RAGBRAI. And I said, I want this physical challenge. So RAGBRAI is a week-long event. Take some time away, go be with friends, and then ride anywhere from 50 to 100 miles a day across the state of Iowa. And then ride that much again the next day and the next day, and just go experience life on the road. And I invited some friends that I knew well from childhood, from college, from work, and I invited friends that I didn't know well, like this one guy named Ben. And he just said yes. And I want to thank you for that, because it's led to cool things. So that's one hard thing that people do, is they say yes when they don't know enough about it, or they just say, I'll try it. And there were other people who said yes on that trip, and some came and rode for a few days. Some came and rode the whole week. My brother came from Hawaii and drove the RV, and we had this awesome experience of doing something physically grueling that none of us were equipped for. Nobody had trained well enough for it. We didn't know what we were doing. We just said we're going to do it. And people took on a charitable challenge too, and we raised like $25,000 for this community center in Davenport, Iowa. And that was a springboard for me to then say, I can take on hard challenges. But long before that, habits started to form that enabled this. So like a few years before that, I did a push-up challenge. I was challenged by a good friend. His name's Bill Bomer. He lives in California. And this guy will take on any kind of challenge you put in front of him. But the push-up challenge was to do 69,000 push-ups in a year. Call it 70,000 just for fun. And do the quick math on that. You got to do like 180, 200 push-ups a day. And I wasn't doing any push-ups. But what was unique was it was just doing one push-up on the first day, and 2 on the second, 3 on the third. You've heard me. You've seen me doing push-ups in random places for this. That was an example of a super hard mental commitment to form a habit. And I've used that in a lot of phases of my life. Probably the dumbest is flossing my teeth. Okay? I don't know if I've ever told you this, but
No, you haven't.
So I'm just being vulnerable and stupid here, but this is real. Someone from the outside can look at anybody and say, well, they're successful. They do all these great things, whatever. But most of the time it starts with a really hard decision to just do something and then progressively get better. My dentist had told me for years, you have to floss your teeth. Well, I didn't think I needed to. I brushed them fine and whatever. Well, I soon realized from some dental things that I needed to. So I made a commitment to myself that I would floss one tooth per night. That's it. Now imagine getting out the floss and winding it up and taking all the time and then just flossing one tooth and throwing it away. But I did that sometimes because that's all my commitment was I'm going to do one. But then I know that's stupid, but you start to take that little thing and, all right, well, then I'm going to do two. I'm already here flossing. I might as well floss them all. And then it's a habit that I do every night now. So this year, we're doing our second annual Solstice Century bike ride. It's like a combination of all these habit forming things and big challenges. So I've invited people to come in and ride 100 miles in a day and take on the challenge of doing something really hard. And our company sponsors it and some other local companies, so riders can do it for free. You were gracious to do it with us last year with some other people. Anna is going to be a competing interest this year, so she wins as she should. But the Solstice Century is a big, hard thing to do for people to accomplish a milestone in a day and to get uncomfortable asking people to support them and give generously to a charity that they choose. And so I can't say enough about taking on a hard challenge for people, but I also want to just relay, like, for me, most of the time, the hardest things were to say, I'm going to get up off the couch, go play catch with my kid, go shoot hoops in the driveway. This was probably the hardest for me. I'm going to jump into a cold pool with my kids who don't really need me anymore, but they'll have fun if I'm in there. And I think I've outgrown that phase. I don't think any of them want me in the pool with them anymore. But there were a lot of years where it would have been easy to sit on the side and have another beer and talk with the adults. But when I did the hard thing to just jump in the pool and hang out with them and their friends, like, amazing stuff happened from it. So it runs the gamut when people say, oh, you do hard things or you like a challenge. Some are big, some are just little daily things.
Zac, can you talk about your hard thing of addressing the thing that I think a lot of people would love to just say, you know what? I don't have, there's no problem here. Like, nothing to see here, folks. Just keep moving on in the form of the mental health.
Yeah. Let's just be real before I tell stories. So I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with mental health issues. And outside looking in, people don't know it, but I've tried to be vulnerable about it and share the story with as many people as I can, because I took on the burdens of a lot of people. This wasn't forced upon me. It was just who I was. But life was cruising along and I was busy and involved in doing lots of things and trying to be intentional and just taking it. And then COVID hit. And COVID, I've talked to a lot of people, this was like the best time of their life. For an introvert, man, COVID couldn't get any better. But for me, it was stressful. It was terrible because I'm going to set a goal. I'm going to do something. So I had my whole year planned out. It all fell apart. We had to shift people from working at our office to home. We had to take care of clients who were stressed out about markets and uncertainty. And then I had my family here who was enjoying time to just chill and not be doing a ton for school and not doing their workouts for sports and not doing lots of things. And I, in my mind, am like, well, this is the best time to get ahead. I could do this, I could do that. So I just kept pushing. And it broke at some point in that model. And I was so depressed. And for people who haven't experienced depression, I used to think of it as like, well, depression is you're down in the dumps. You're like Eeyore and everything's bad and you want to cry all the time, but it's not. For me, at least, it wasn't. It was a lack of emotion. I was like a robot just going through life. I'd be in the best experiences and I couldn't get elevated to find a joy in it. And I'd be experiencing something terrible and I couldn't get sad about it. It was like this. And what I look back on and I'm so grateful for is that I had met people in our community. I knew people. I'd heard others talk about mental health. And I had a person I could call and said, here's what I'm dealing with. And they got me paired up with a therapist. And I had access to care immediately and I could afford it and had someone to talk to. And I was able to work through a bunch of things. And I'm not fixed. I don't think mental health is like you're cured right? We're all on this up and down field, but I was able to move through and find some things that worked for me to think differently about life, to approach things differently, and to find medication that helped balance. By the way, this is a tangent, but the mental health industry has like terrible branding and marketing, right? They say you're down in life, you're low on serotonin, like you're down, so you need to take this antidepressant. I mean, just what a terrible name for a medication. It's like a double negative on top of your negative life experience that you're feeling. So I would rebrand it and just say, you need to increase your serotonin. And that's all it was for me, along with some conversations, some thought processes, some approaches. But I found medication that could increase my serotonin levels that would allow me to experience these emotions better than I was. And I know I had it relatively easy for mental health because I had access and I was able to get help and I had a supportive wife. And there's a lot of people who don't, and there's a lot that struggle with many worse things. But for me, the reason I love to share it is because people helped me through that journey and supported me. And too often we just, like, people will want to shoulder all that themselves. They just say, I'm embarrassed, I can't talk about this. But it's natural. It's as natural as twisting your ankle when you're out running, or hurting your shoulder when you're doing something around the house. Like, life just throws curveballs. And then whether it's your physical health or mental health, there's times that we need help to work through them.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I think the thing that I'm taking, especially from what you're saying and from my own experiences, I think running 200 miles, sure, that is hard. And I like that you called out the hardest thing that you've had to do was actually getting yourself off the couch to actually go play ball with like your boys, hopping in the the cold pool. But I think also having the willingness to be vulnerable, to share that today, but I think two, also for you to be willing to go down that own internal conversation.
Yeah. So Ben, I love your podcast and the message about MaxLife. Like, who doesn't want to maximize their life? But I'm also aware of so many people that, like, today is hard, or I'm just trying to get through today, and they can't maximize it. So I had a pastor, a great mentor, a person who's been a business coach for me. His name's Glenn Wagner. And he always used to conclude studies and conversations with, like, so what, now what? So you've learned this, you've heard it. Now what are you going to do with it? And I think for someone listening who says, yeah, my life's just hard today, I kind of say, okay, well then now what? Like, what little habit can they change? And for someone who's on a mountaintop right now where life is great, then the challenge is a little different. It's like, okay, well, maybe now's the moment that they got to take a big step forward. And maybe they need to write the largest check they've ever written to an organization they're passionate about. So we're all at different points, but I hope that, like, our conversation today is hopefully enough to make them say, okay, well, now what? What will I do with this to take a step forward or a big leap?
Number one, I love that. And I think you maybe said that in the past when you and I've had conversation, but I love that. So what, now what? Call to action. It's the thing that I tell the entrepreneurs I coach, that the number one ingredient of value creation is taking action. It's so the so what, now what, I think is such a great framework. It's it's so interesting to me. I think that the hard things that happen in our life, or if you're having a hard time, I actually think that whether you want to call it the universe, or that's God, or that's, just, I think that is literally an incredible gift that's been given to you. And in my experience of that is, when I go back, and it really clarified for me with the journey through of the excitement of Benny being born, and then the realization after he was born, with the realization that this was a kind of a one-way trip here, and then the crystallization of like when you have to make the decision to like pull the breathing tube, right? And so many people, I think, looked at me and going, that must have been hard. And it was hard. I'll tell you, pulling your breathing tube from your child's mouth is honestly, I don't think I'll have anything that harder to deal with. But it was this incredible moment, though, of it's in the hardness is like where you get the clarity. It's in the hardness that you have the ability to ask yourself, so what, now what?
Well, you have the opportunity. Not everybody does, and it's something I admire and love about you, Ben. I've lived this journey with you. I've heard you talk about it with others, and I'm tearing up just hearing you, because I know the raw emotion that's still there. And Kristen and I got to meet Benny, which was a gift, and see you guys in that moment. But not everybody takes time to be self-aware and reflective of hardship. And I think that's what's from the outside looking in, that's what I think you've done incredibly well on this. And I think could be encouraging to others is like, even when you were in it, you were writing messages to us and updates that were reflective, that you could be real and raw about the emotion and the hardship, but you were reflective enough to see how things maybe fit or work together a little bit. And that's incredible, that gift that you've given to other people through Benny.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And thank you. And thank you for being on that journey with Jenna and I. I'm curious, what do you think holds people back from that willingness to go into the awareness piece?
I don't know, because for me, it's so natural. I want to get better, so I try to self-reflect and be self-aware. My mom never gave unsolicited parenting advice when we had little kids. But there was a breaking point along the way for me one time where I was just like, I don't know what to do. And she had made comments before with our son, Alex. He's our second. And Alex is an incredible, charismatic, charming young man, just graduate. But boy, he humbled me as a parent over and over. And there was a time my mom said to someone, "I've raised this child before." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Mom, that I put you through that." But it was in a moment like that where I asked her, and I said, "How did you help me get through it then?" And she said, we tried to make you aware that the world was bigger than you. And that's what I think maybe holds some people back from this, is when the world is like crushing us, when things are hard, it's easy to just say, my life sucks. This is not fair. I don't deserve this. And they're probably right on all those accounts, but it's bigger than that too. And how do we fit in? How do things happen around us? How does our reaction impact others? And so, I like to ask myself questions, and I ask our kids questions. Our 8th grader is a good baseball player, but he gets so hard on himself, and baseball is not a game of perfect. Like, mistakes happen, strikeouts happen. The other day, he is a phenomenal catcher, but he missed a play he should have made on a pop-up. And he reacted to it so negatively, it like sucked the life out of the team in the stands, and people didn't really know how to react. And that changed the momentum in the game. And so I said to him a couple days later, because I've also learned the rule, never talk to him after a game about game. Like, nobody wants that criticism. I don't want that in my own life after a meeting. Like, don't tell me how I sucked on stage. Just save it for another day. And I said, how else could you have handled it? And he's like, I don't know. And I said, well, you don't have to know. Just give me a couple ideas. And eventually he opened up and gave a couple perspectives. And I said, great. So here's a couple other things I think of, like, you could have done. You could have made a joke about it. You could have said to your team, sorry guys, I got the next one. Like, a lot of different ways to handle a situation. And I'm trying to just help them see that they don't have to be a victim. Everybody knows that he didn't want to drop that ball. Everybody knows he's frustrated with himself. You don't have to play the victim and let that carry through. As another example, so this past weekend we had 11 baseball games and basketball games combined in our family. So I always go to sports analogies, but our junior is playing in his first varsity action summer league, and he had played a couple of good games, but in one game he was a little off. Basically airballed a 3 that like nicked the rim, and instead of getting mad, he made a joke to his teammate about it. He caused several other people to laugh, and then he just played through. And I think we can't always laugh off a situation, right? We can't always make light of it, but we can play through. And that's what I try to do. That's what I see you doing all the time. And you and Jenna have played through Benny's situation amazingly. And I love what you're doing with 16 days on the other side of it to say, how can you give more opportunity and better experiences to people who are struggling with the situation?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Zac, if people want to know more about you, where do they find you? Where can they read more about you? I know you have a book that you launched, which is a number 1 in its category. Where can they find more about you?
Yeah, I would love to connect. If people want to connect at a personal level, search me up on Instagram. I'll friend you. I'll let you in on my life. LinkedIn is, I try to keep a balance of personal and professional there. And our company website is intentgen.com. It's the 2 words we talked about a lot today. We named our company after when we polled people and they said, we said, what do you think of us? What do you think of when you think of our company and the work we do? And intentional and generous kept coming up. So we smushed them together. So intentgen.com has a little bit of my professional life and podcasts and things that I'm doing and that our company's doing. So would love to connect with listeners. And man, I love what you are doing. I've enjoyed listening to podcasts so far that you've got out here with so many great thought leaders and people.
I super appreciate that. And I appreciate you having you on. Zac, one of the things I'd like to do is have our guests give the last thought, the last ripple, the last thing that our guests are going to walk away with. So what would you like our guests or our audience, to think about?
I've actually thought about this question, Ben, because I've heard you ask it to other people, and I was hoping I could come up with something profound and thoughtful and deep, but I'll just close with what my pastor and coach would say to me is, so what? Now what? You invested an hour of your life into listening to us. Now what? What's one thing they want to do different with it?
Yeah, I love that. So what? Now what? Taking action, having agency, and having clarity that tomorrow is just a better day. I love that so much, Zac. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for just being so generous, with your stories, with your vulnerability, and also with just, I think, how you uniquely look at generosity, intentionality, and hard things.
Well, thanks, Ben.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.